This fact happened when I was 15 years old, beginning of last year, 2018, when I finally got to sophomore year here in Brazil. It was an ordinary Friday night. Suddenly, I felt a little bit hungry, so I decided to put on some clothes and go to the snack bar. It was barely 10 minutes from my house. I usually pass through the alley to go to the snack bar, but that time, everything was so creepy in there. When I was halfway there, it was dark, empty, abnormally cold and gloomy. I felt slightly intimidated, but there was nothing there that could really harm me. So I decided to just go through that alley. Then I thought, nothing's gonna happen. I kept going until I suddenly heard something weird on the other side of the alley. There was a man in there, staring at the walls in hunchback stance, grunting weirdly. I found that incredibly creepy, but I was nearly at the snack bar, so all I needed was just to get out of that alley. Walk 1 minute more and I finally would get there, instead of making it all the way home with empty hands. Thus, I decided to ignore him and pass through after all. I finally passed through him. He turned to me and stared at me with a creepy smile, which made me walk a little bit faster, trying to avoid him. Then, suddenly, I heard a grunt and quick steps behind me. When I looked back, it was him. We were barely 2 feet away from each other. He had a kitchen knife in his right hand and jumped on me with amazing speed and tried to stab me. I managed to grab both of his arms before he could get me. However, since he was charging at me, he still had more energy to push me back and force me against a wall. I was terrified with all of that. I knew I would die if I didn't fight back. Back then, I was already trained in some martial arts to defend myself, but that I thought I'd never need to use that skill to defend my life until now. So, in a sudden burst of adrenaline, I managed to twist the wrist which he was holding the knife, kicking his stomach and punching him mercilessly in the face several times. In the end, his face was bleeding so much, but his body was ignoring the pain of the blows in his body and only focusing on killing me. Finally, I used a training that I took before to twist both of his wrists and elbows harshly at the same time, forced in 2 different directions, and kicked the backside of his leg, putting him to the ground until ultimately he could drop the knife. It wasn't easy because he was struggling and punching my back and somehow trying to jump on me. But since I had his arm under my grasp, he couldn't do much without breaking himself. I slammed his head in the concrete ground, stunning him, then kept striking his face desperately while kneeling over his arm so he wouldn't be able to react or reach his knife again. And finally, he was out cold, bleeding a lot. My knuckles were full of blood and hurt. So I got up, took his knife, throwing it far away from there, and ran away from him. I finally got to the snack bar, washed my hands in there, and did everything I had to do before going back home. But obviously, I didn't take the same path as I did before. But there were things that got much creepier. That was at the entrance of my apartment, where I heard screams coming from the other side of the street. It was the same crazy man. Now, seeming like he was possessed by a demon, and he was slamming his head on the iron door of my building's entrance. His face was horribly deformed and scarred from our fight. That freaked me out completely. My parents were on a trip and the watchman of our building was on vacation. I wasn't going to fight that man again, so I decided to rush to my girlfriend's house. When I got there, she was home alone. She looked worried because I was looking pale and there were still some marks of the man's blood on my clothes. I explained everything to her, and we called the police to come by my building. And when they arrived, the man was still in the entrance trying to force the doors unsuccessfully. When he saw the police, he attacked them, but got quickly dominated by the cops. They explained that he was probably a crazy psycho in the streets looking for prey to rape, kill, or do anything he wanted to the person. So they sent him to a high-security mental asylum for criminals far away from my house. I feel so lucky that I survived that day, and I'm hoping that I will never see that man again. This story happened when I was in the 9th grade. I was going home after being at my friend's apartment. He's one of my good friends, so I often visited him. It was about 9 p.m. at night. Usually I went home at 5 or 6 when I visited him, but it was final exam week, so I went home later than usual to prepare for it together. He lives on the 15th floor. I took the freight elevator down because it was quicker than the passenger elevator. The elevator is kinda old, shaky, and not really well maintained. The fan isn't working, the walls are rusty, full of graffiti, and the light flickers, as you would expect from an old building's elevator. At the moment, there were 3 or 4 people with me going down to the lobby. The elevator went down normally. Then, suddenly, at the 9th floor, the door opened. I saw one of my other friends. Her name is Billy. She was playing, laughing with some kids who I assumed to be her friends. Then she looked at me and smiled. I stared at her for a moment, but I didn't reply to her because, well, we're not that close. Nothing came to mind to say. So the elevator closed back up and took me to the lobby. But soon, I realized that no one that was on the elevator with me seemed to notice those kids, despite the loud laughter they made. But once again, I didn't care about it, so I went back home and rested. The day after, I saw Billy again. Out of curiosity, I asked her, "Hey, why were you playing so late at night? Why didn't you stay at home?" She looked confused, as if I was asking her a random question. She then asked me, "Well, what do you mean? I didn't go anywhere yesterday. I was at my house." I was a bit confused, and I couldn't believe what she just said. She then asked me again, "Well, what was I wearing yesterday?" I answered, "You wore a white t-shirt, right?" I was hoping that she would say yes, but she said no. I felt my heart dropping. If it wasn't her that I saw last night, then who? A few days later, as usual, I was visiting my friend and went home late again. I waved goodbye to him as I was walking the corridor. One thing came to mind. How am I going to get down? Remembering those elevator things, I took the stairs. Well, I guess it wasn't a really good decision, but at least better than that scary elevator. I walked down the dark stairwell. Once in a while, I looked at the open part, and this time, I saw a shadow figure looking out from the balcony across. It seemed normal to me, probably a person looking down, so I kept on walking. Watching my step, I looked back up again, and suddenly, the shadow figure thing disappeared into nowhere in just a blink of an eye. I was so scared thinking about how the hell did that guy disappear that quickly? By jumping down the balcony? My steps went quicker, but to my astonishment, I saw the sign 8th floor, which means I saw that figure when I was on the 9th floor. That same floor that I witnessed the ghost Billy. Soon I called my friend and told him about it. He was surprised and told me that a lot of people also said that the 9th floor is actually haunted. There was once a guy that died there, but was found rotting in his apartment room 3 days later.
Hi, I live in a city of Philippines. This incident happened to me a while ago, but it reminded me forever and ever. That day, I was staying outside for some schedule, and it was kind of late, so I thought that I have no choice but to take a jeepney, which is a public vehicle in the Philippines, to ride back home. The street was pretty quiet, as I saw one jeepney was going to pass through, so I waved my hand. And when I just entered a jeepney, my eye directly reached a woman besides the driver's seat. The woman looked asleep beside the driver, and for her head is resting at his shoulders, so I thought that woman was a girlfriend of the driver. I sat to behind side, and in my front view of my seat, there was an old man, so there were only 4 passengers during that time. The inside of jeepney was quiet. Nobody was talking, and I didn't any pay attention to others. And that was the most worst things happened. When the jeepney have traveled for a few meters more, Then the old man who was in front of me suddenly asked the driver to stop the vehicle and dragged me outside. At the first time, I didn't recognize what was going on. Then I was just scared of his sudden behavior, so I shouted, "Stop it!" He had no replies for a few seconds. Then he replied, "Shh, trust me." Still confused, but I quickly followed what he said because I'm very nervous that time and don't know what should I do. My mind was almost blew up. I kept thinking, what if he was going to steal something kill me? What should I do? When we already have left the jeepney, he stared me and finally told me with calm voice that the girl who was beside the driver's seat was already dead. I could not believe what was he saying. Then he said again, I saw with my own eyes. Her lips and nails were already black, and her waist have an ice pick stabbed on it and full of blood. I was shocked. If I didn't follow that old man so I didn't get off, what would be the next? The old man left behind me and said again, "You should be careful next time." After that day, when I get on jeepney, I always pay attention abnormally.
Two weeks ago, I woke up in the morning to get ready for school, as usual. Because I live in a small village, there's no bus that drives to my school, so I always have to drive with my bike about 4 miles. As I didn't want to drive alone, a friend of mine would drive with me to school every day. One morning, me and my friend would meet up at our place. Driving to the place, I wasn't feeling well, and my friend was waiting when I got to the place. We drove along through the woods and made some jokes about what was going to happen at school today. As we were driving, I heard some sticks cracking, and I thought nothing about it. Seconds I told my friend everything, and surprisingly, he said that he saw something like that in one of his dreams. I still don't know what that figure was and why my friend had a dream about that thing. I put down my blinds and shut my window at night. Always. Now we have a bus that brings us to school. I didn't tell my mom about this, and never will.